He gambled. Morning came slowly to the Wyoming mountains. Sam Harrison woke just before dawn. The house was silent, as if the whole world was still asleep. Outside, the blizzard had left fresh drifts of snow, and frost traced icy patterns across the window panes. Long shadows stretched across the walls, and the cold in the air was something Sam had long since learned to live with. He dressed without hurry, an old wool sweater, worn-out pants, a jacket with frayed elbows, and a hat pulled down over his ears. It took a minute to warm up his boots. They'd frozen to the floor overnight. It was well below zero outside, but that kind of cold was nothing new for Sam. First, he headed to the barn to check on the animals. Inside, it was just a bit warmer, thick with the smell of hay, dust, and the comfort of living creatures. The pigs greeted him with snorts. The horses watched him warily from their stalls. Same routine as always. A bucket of feed, some warm water, a few gentle words. Not really for the animals, but more for himself, if he was honest. The house had been empty for more than half a year now. His wife had left for town, saying she couldn't live so far for people anymore. Sam was left alone, just like hundreds of other folks out here, clinging to old habits, tough memories, and the little chores that kept him going. He rarely bothered to light the fireplace in the mornings. Too many memories. The warmth always brought back the smell of pies baking, the sound of laughter, someone humming as they brushed their hair by the window. Now, it was just his own footsteps and the creak of the floorboards. In the kitchen, one plate, one glass, one spoon. In the cupboard, a loaf of bread already going stale, a can of beans, some salted meat, and a little coffee left. Sam didn't complain. Keeping it simple made things easier. He turned on the lamp, poured himself the last of yesterday's tea from the old thermos, drank it down, and stepped back out into the cold. All around the ranch stretched snowy fields, not a single track except his own, out and back, day after day. So began another morning, just like 100 before it, quiet, cold, filled with small routines. But Sam had no way of knowing that today, while everything seemed the same, someone else's trouble was already on its way to his door, ready to change everything. Sam had just stepped back inside when, through the howl of the wind, he heard a thin, frightened cry. He froze on the threshold, listening. Was it just his imagination? But the cry came again, louder this time, laced with desperation. He dropped his gloves, threw open the door, and hurried toward the sound. Right by the gate, where the snowdrifts nearly reached his knees, stood 3 little girls. The oldest, maybe 8, wrapped in an old dress and a faded scarf, was holding the youngest in her arms. Beside her, barely able to stand, was another girl, her lips cracked, her big eyes swollen from crying. All 3 were frozen, as if they'd become part of the endless snow. Sam felt something break inside him. He walked closer, kneeling down to meet them eye to eye. The oldest girl, her eyes filled with fear and exhaustion, managed to whisper, "Mr. Our Mama died in the ice this morning. We were looking for a house with smoke." Her voice cracked, and she hugged her little sister tighter. The littlest one's nose was red, her hands shaking, tears freezing on her cheeks almost as soon as they fell. The middle sister clung to the oldest like a kitten to its mother. "What are your names?" Sam asked, struggling for words. I'm Annie." The oldest finally looked him in the eye. "This is Rosie." She nodded at the one standing close. "And the little one is Lily. We were so cold. Mama said if we found a good person, they wouldn't turn us away." Sam felt his throat tighten. He quickly unwound his long scarf and wrapped it around Lily, pulled a spare pair of wool mittens from his pocket, and slid them onto Rosie's hands. "Come on, let's get inside," he said quietly. "It's all right now. You're safe here, you hear?" All at once, Annie broke down, crying for the first time, letting go of all the fear and pain. Rosie clung to his arm. Lily sobbed quietly into her sister's neck. Sam gently lifted Lily into his arms and put a steady hand on Rosie's shoulder. Annie grabbed his sleeve and wouldn't let go, as if she was afraid everything would vanish if she did. The walk to the house took less than a minute, but for the girls, it felt like a lifetime. On the porch, Sam quickly but gently helped them off with their frozen shoes. "Hang on just a little longer," he whispered, helping them inside. "I'll get the fire going, and you'll warm up." As soon as Sam lit the stove, the house felt a little less cold. He wrapped each girl in a blanket, settled them on the bench near the fire, took off their shoes, and set a bowl of warm water by their hands. "Mama," Annie whimpered again. "She's not getting up. She told us to keep going as long as we could." "Don't think about that right now," Sam said, nodding for them to drink some water. "I'll help you. You're not alone." While the girls thawed out, Sam tried not to look at their frostbitten fingers and scrapes. He didn't want them to see his tears. He realized these little ones had faced more hardship than most grown folks see in a lifetime. And for the first time in many months, Sam felt that this day wasn't just another cold sunrise on a lonely ranch. It was the start of something bigger, and there was no way he could ever let these children go. The house was quiet, with only the crackle of the stove breaking the silence. The girls sat close together on the bench by the fire, wrapped in old woolen blankets Sam had found in the trunk by the door. Little Lily still shivered, burying her face in Annie's shoulder. Rosie quietly rubbed her hands, hardly able to believe she was finally someplace warm and bright, not out in the snow. Sam moved back and forth between the kitchen and the room, doing his best to move quickly without scaring the girls any more than they already were. He handed them mugs of warm milk. Lily could barely hold hers, and Rosie stared at the cup suspiciously before finally taking a tiny sip. "Don't be afraid," Sam said gently, crouching beside them. "No one's going to hurt you here. Eat, rest. I'm right here." He brought out some bread, heated up beans with a bit of ham, and poured it into deep bowls. The girls ate cautiously, as if it might all vanish if they weren't careful. Annie helped the younger ones. She held the spoon for Lily, tucked the blanket around her, tried to encourage Rosie. It was clear Annie was scared herself, but she did everything she could to help her sisters feel just a little safer. "Are you still cold?" Sam asked, tucking another blanket around Lily. "Hold on, you'll warm up soon." Lily just nodded, still clutching her cup. Rosie finally looked up at Sam. "Is it true? Mama won't ever wake up." Sam lowered his gaze. "Right now, the most important thing is for you to get warm. I'll help you. I promise." The girls stayed pressed together, afraid to move too far apart. Even inside, they couldn't quite believe this was a safe place. Annie glanced around the room. This strange house, this strange man. She'd grown up too fast. There was a fear in her eyes that stays with a child who's had to face too much, too soon. She didn't eat until she was sure her sisters had had enough, and only then did she accept a piece of bread from Sam. Sam sat across from them, pretending to sip his tea, but really he was watching every one of the girls. He knew now was not the time for questions or rushing. What they needed most was a little peace, a little warmth, and to know that no one would turn them away. Before long, Lily dozed off on Annie's shoulder. Rosie quietly stroked her sister's hair. Annie wiped away a tear with her sleeve and looked at Sam. Her gaze was stubborn, old beyond her years. "We're not a burden, are we?" she asked, very quietly, almost in a whisper. Sam answered without hesitation. "You're my guests, and there's always room here for anyone in trouble." He smiled, a real, gentle smile, as if he was close to tears himself. For the first time that day, the girls relaxed a little. Warmth, food, and even just the faintest hope. That was already a lot for children who'd only just started to believe they might not be unwanted. The house grew even quieter as darkness settled outside. The stove crackled softly, and an old clock ticked in the corner. Sam, not wanting to disturb the girls, stepped out to the kitchen, giving them a little space to be alone. It was warm in the room, but the girls huddled close together, as if they still couldn't believe they were truly safe. Rosie cried in her sleep, quietly, but enough to make Annie's heart ache. Little Lily, half asleep, called out for their mother with a sad, shaky voice. "Mommy, Mommy, where are you?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Annie wrapped her arms around both sisters, stroking their hair, trying to be the grown-up, but she couldn't fall asleep herself. She kept her eyes on Sam, Every time he came closer, her gaze turned wary. Annie had met people before who promised help, only to kick them out or demand something in return. It was scary to trust. Sam noticed how tense Annie was, always watching him, but he didn't make any sudden moves. He understood. Wounds of mistrust heal slowly, especially in children who've been let down too many times. Lily whimpered softly in her sleep, pressed against Annie's shoulder. Rosie woke from a nightmare, her voice shaking as she asked, "Annie, are you there?" "I'm here, don't be scared." "I'm right here." Annie stroked her hair, keeping her from crying harder. Sam quietly came to the doorway, just to make sure they were all right. Annie tensed, holding her sisters tighter. He knew now wasn't the time for words, so he just gave a gentle smile and left, leaving the door slightly ajar. That night, Annie hardly slept at all. She clung to her little sister's hands, as if any weakness would make it all disappear. "Don't fall asleep first," she kept telling herself. "I promised Mama I'd be brave. I won't let anyone near them until I know if he can be trusted." That night, Sam's house became a place where the girls' fears hadn't vanished. But for the first time in a long while, they had a roof over their heads, warmth, and someone nearby who didn't yell, didn't frighten, didn't chase them away. They were still scared, but hope began to quietly stir somewhere deep inside. The house grew even quieter. Sam did his best to make himself invisible, careful not to startle the girls. He put another log in the stove, poured warm tea for himself and Annie. Lily slept curled up on the bench under a blanket. Rosie clung to her big sister, her eyes fixed on the glow of the fire. "What's your name?" Sam asked softly, trying not to scare her. I'm Annie," she answered after a pause, hugging Lily closer. "And this is Rosie and Lily. We're sisters." He nodded, letting her see he was listening, not pushing for answers. "Mama," Rosie started, but Annie quickly stopped her with a look. "Is your mama? Is she nearby?" Sam asked gently. Annie dropped her head, then stared out the window where the frost was melting on the glass. "Mama couldn't go any farther," she managed, her voice suddenly sounding much older. "We walked all night in the snow. Mama said if we saw smoke from a house, we should ask for help. But she stayed by the rocks near the river. She didn't have the strength to go on." Sam felt a tightness in his chest. He silently handed Annie a cup of tea, so she could warm her hands. "How long ago did you leave her there?" he asked. "I don't know." Annie shook her head. "We walked a long time. I'm scared to go back at night," she admitted very quietly. "Mama said if we found someone kind, not to let them go." Sam listened without interrupting. It was clear how hard it was for Annie to talk about all this. Even now, she couldn't quite believe this wasn't just another trick, another disappointment. "You're brave, Annie," he said softly. "You're a real big sister." A faint smile flickered on her face, though the fear was still there in her eyes. "And please, don't go out there at night," she asked anxiously. "What if something? I'm scared she's already gone." Sam gently covered her hand with his. "I don't make promises I can't keep," he said. "Let's wait for morning. Right now, you're safe here. I'll stay with you as long as you need." Annie looked at him, not with suspicion, but with gratitude. She hugged Lily tight again and, for the first time all day, allowed herself to relax just a little. In that moment, Sam knew for certain, whatever had happened to their mother, he had to try to help. Once the girls grew quiet by the stove, Sam knew he couldn't wait any longer. He glanced at the little ones sleeping by the fire and at Annie, who hadn't truly closed her eyes. Not really. The worry in her gaze was clear, even in the dim light. Sam spoke softly, careful to sound calm and reassuring. "Annie, I'm going down to the river now. I'll try to find your mama." The girl nodded, but tensed up, as if she was afraid he'd vanish on her. "Do you think is she?" Annie hesitated, unable to finish. Sam didn't say what he really thought. He knew the winter here was brutal, and if a woman had been alone in the cold that long, the odds were slim. But the most important thing now was to keep the child from breaking down. He gently placed a hand on Annie's shoulder. "You know, people do amazing things for their children. Your mama wanted you girls to find a safe place. and I'll do everything I can to help her." He smiled as warmly and confidently as he could. "As long as there's even a little hope, we have to try." Annie watched him closely, searching his face for something to hold on to. He saw her lips tremble, but she held it together, taking a deep breath. Sam handed her his old army coat. "I want you to be in charge here while I'm gone," he said. "Wear this coat. It's big and warm. If you get scared, bring your sisters close and stay by the fire. There's firewood right here, bread and milk in the kitchen. Don't open the door to anyone but me, even if you hear a voice you know." Annie took the coat with both hands, as if it were a precious gift, and wrapped up her sisters. "You can do this. I know you can," he added, giving her a gentle pat on the head. Sam quickly gathered what he needed: a lantern, matches, a slab of salt pork, his knife, and a pocket full of revolver cartridges. He buttoned his coat and pulled his hat down over his ears. He paused at the door, one last look at the children. Annie stared straight into his eyes. She didn't even try to smile, just squeezed Lily's shoulder a little tighter. "I'll be back, Annie," he promised. "And you're the real soldier here. Please, come back with Mama," the girl whispered. He stepped out into the night. The cold bit straight through him, but Sam moved fast, refusing to let himself think too much. Only when he was far enough from the house did he let himself admit the truth. There was almost no chance. But if there was even the tiniest hope, he couldn't just sit and do nothing. Maybe, on a night like this, small miracles really could happen. In the darkness, battered by wind and snow, Sam made his way toward the river. Everything around him was gray and white, and only now and then, when the wind let up for a moment, could Sam make out faint tracks in the snow. They were small, scattered, like those left by children, and another set, even more uncertain, veered off toward the river beyond the hill. Breathing was hard. The cold burned his lungs, crept under his clothes. Sam forced himself to move faster, not allowing his mind to dwell on what he might find ahead. He kept repeating to himself, "Hold on, Jane, just a little longer," even though he knew no one could hear him now. His hat slipped back on his head, frost clung to his brow, and his lips cracked from the cold. Sometimes he sank into deep drifts, struggling to climb out, his legs shaking from exhaustion. Far off, somewhere between the hills, he heard the howl of wolves. His heart skipped a beat. Out here, in the dead of winter, hungry animals sometimes came dangerously close to people's homes. Still, he didn't slow down. Stubbornness, fear for the children, and some new, unfamiliar resolve kept him moving forward. Every so often, he stopped to catch his breath and search for landmarks: a cluster of big rocks, a broken-down fence on an old pasture, a crooked pine tree that stood out in the distance. At last, he spotted a small shape near the edge, a patch of snow, or maybe a piece of cloth. His heart pounded. Sam rushed forward, breathless with fear. By the rocks, the snow was especially deep, nearly up to his waist, and the wind nearly knocked him over. He dropped to his knees and began digging through the snow with his hands, not wanting to waste a single second. Finally, under layers of snow, he found the shape of a woman, curled up, as if she'd tried to hide between two large rocks. Her dark hair was stiff with frost, her face blue from the cold, her eyelashes thick with ice crystals. With trembling hands, Sam touched her neck. At first he felt nothing, then finally a faint, barely there pulse. He let out a breath, so deep he forgot the cold for a moment. "Jane," he whispered, not knowing if she could hear him, but speaking anyway. "Jane, can you hear me? I'm here for you. Don't give up." She was barely conscious, her lips barely moving, her eyes still closed. There were scratches on her arms. Her dress was torn in places. Sam wrapped her in his wool scarf, rubbing her hands and face to warm her up, then gently hoisted her over his shoulders. She felt frighteningly light, almost weightless, like a child. He feared that, at any moment, the burden in his arms might vanish completely, along with her breath. On the way back, Sam pushed himself to his very limits. The wind picked up, the blizzard spun the snow in wild spirals, and somewhere nearby he heard wolves again, closer this time. He didn't stop, just clutched Jane tighter and kept whispering in her ear, soft, urgent words, like a prayer, like an order. Don't fall asleep. Your girls need you hear? They need you so much. Please hold on. He could hardly feel his hands. His fingers were raw and burning, his legs heavy with exhaustion. But Sam didn't stop. Only when he saw the distant light of his house did a real warmth bloom in his chest. That was where hope waited, where someone was counting on him. Sam barely made it home, carrying Jane in his arms. The door gave way with difficulty, and right away, the girls rushed into the entryway. Annie was the first on her feet, but froze halfway, not believing her eyes. Rosie let out a cry, and Lily clung to her sister when she saw their mother's pale face. "Mom!" Annie's voice quivered, as if she was afraid to break the miracle. Sam laid Jane down on blankets by the stove. He quickly stripped off her frozen clothes, covered her with anything he could find, old throws, his coat, blankets from the children's beds. He told Annie to fetch hot water, Rosie to bring wood for the stove, and Lily to hold her mother's hand and not let go for a second. The girls rushed to their tasks. Lily sat beside her, squeezing her mother's fingers and refusing to let go. She stared at Jane with wide, unblinking eyes, as if blinking might make her mother disappear forever. Sam warmed some milk, brewed up old herbal tea, and began feeding Jane tiny spoonfuls, even though she barely responded. He kept talking to her the whole time, calm, insistent, sometimes a little louder when it seemed like she was slipping away. "You're here, Jane. Hold on. The girls are right here. Everything's okay, do you hear?" Annie, the eldest, helped Sam, changing out towels, wiping her mother's forehead, tucking the blankets tighter. But her movements lacked the confidence of a grown-up. She was just a frightened little girl forced to grow up too fast. Sometimes she'd slow down, stare at her mother's face for a long time, searching for the slightest sign of life. Rosie sat a bit apart, now and then letting out a sob, burying her face in a pillow. But the second she heard her mother breathe, she'd rush over, peering into Sam's eyes. Was she alive? Was she getting worse? The hours dragged on endlessly. The house, always too empty and quiet, was now full. But it wasn't a comforting warmth. It was thick with worry and hope. No one really slept that night. Sam sat by the stove, listening to every breath Jane took. Annie would lie down with her sisters from time to time, but still got up every half hour, coming over to check that her mother was still alive. Rosie was too tired to cry anymore, and simply held her sister's hand, while Lily wouldn't let go of her mother's palm, pressed up against her side, whispering softly, "Mom, don't leave. Mom, we're here." Sam never strayed far. Whenever Jane began to tremble or mutter in fever, he placed a damp cloth on her forehead, spoke words of encouragement. He didn't allow himself a moment of weakness. If he lost hope now, the girls wouldn't survive it. That night, along with the cold and fear, new sounds filled the house, soft children's whispers, words of comfort, pleas and hope. Sam listened, and suddenly realized that everything he used to wake up for no longer mattered. Now, in this house, someone's fate was being decided. A new life was taking shape, even if only on the edge. Early in the morning, before it was fully light, Sam sat by the stove, tired and hunched over. He'd barely slept at all. He kept listening for any change in Jane's breathing, or to see if the girls would start crying again. At times, it felt like the night would never end, as if time itself had frozen in this little house at the edge of the winter mountains. But then, something in the room changed. First, Lily stirred in her sleep and suddenly whimpered, "Mom!" Sam lifted his head and saw Jane move slightly. Her eyelids fluttered. Annie, who had stayed by her mother's head all this time, noticed first. "Mom! Mom!" she called softly, afraid to scare the moment away. Jane turned her head, just a little. Her lips were pale, but she tried to smile. Her eyes opened slowly, cloudy, tired, but alive. The first thing she saw were 3 tear-streaked, but happy, children's faces. "Annie, Rosie, Lily," She whispered so quietly that the girls could hardly believe their luck. In that instant, all three threw themselves at her. Lily pressed her face in her mother's shoulder. Rosie hugged her tightly around the neck. Annie wiped her tears and smiled. A real, child smile for the first time in days. "Mom, you're awake. You're here with us," the girls repeated, as if afraid it might all be just a dream. Jane gathered their hands in her own, weak and still barely alive. She tried to speak, but tears streamed from her eyes instead of words. The girls cried too, but now it was tears of relief and happiness. Sam couldn't stay in the room any longer. He stood up, not wanting them to see him cry, and went out onto the porch, breathing in the sharp, cold air. He watched the sunrise breaking through the clouds, and for the first time in a long while, let himself believe that miracles do happen. Inside, behind the closed door, soft, happy voices, children's laughter and whispers drifted out, like music for a new life, beginning with a miracle. Slowly the house quieted again. The girls finally fell asleep beside their mother, pressed up close to her side. Sam came back inside, lit the stove in the kitchen, and set coffee to brew. Jane lay with her eyes closed, resting, then slowly sat up, wrapped herself in a blanket, and came to join Sam in the kitchen. They were alone, just the two of them in the quiet morning, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the soft sighs of the girls in the next room. Sam didn't press her with questions. He waited for Jane to speak in her own time. She stayed silent for a long while, as if she was gathering up all the pain that had been building in her for weeks. At last, Jane lifted her head and looked at Sam. "You need to know the truth," she said quietly, as if afraid even to say it out loud. "The father of my children. I always believed he wasn't such a bad man. I kept hoping he'd change, become the person he used to be. But he was ruined by gambling. First, he lost our money, then the things from the house. I could see the fear in his eyes, but it was never for us, only for himself. That day he left, just like any other. It was so cold. I was feeding the girls, waiting for him to come home. But he didn't. Instead, there was a knock at our door that night. 3 men, strangers, wearing dirty coats. They didn't smile, didn't introduce themselves. They just said straight out, 'Your husband lost his children to us. We're here to collect his debt. Your girls.' I didn't realize at first that it wasn't some cruel joke. I waited for my husband to walk in, to say, 'Sorry, it's a mistake.' But he never showed up. Not that night. Not in that awful hour. They told me he'd run off that very afternoon, right after the game. He just disappeared from town. He left us. I could barely breathe, Sam. My head was spinning. It felt like the whole world was falling apart. But I had to do something. I held the girls by their shoulders, listened to them ask, 'Mommy, who are these men?' And I tried to think of what to do. I asked those men to give us a little time, to dress the girls, to say goodbye. I told them I couldn't just hand my children over. One of them smirked and gave me 10 minutes, then stepped outside with the others. I knew right away we didn't have an hour, not even a quarter hour. I acted on pure instinct, got the girls dressed, shoved a little bread and a few sweaters and some money into a sack. I could hear the men outside, talking about where they'd take my girls. My heart was pounding, my hands shaking so bad I could barely tie shoelaces. "Annie, Lily, Rosie," I whispered, looking them in the eyes. "We have to be very quiet now, you hear? Just hold on to me and don't cry." I opened the back door. I don't even remember how we got out. Felt like we ran all night, not caring where we went. I could hear the bandits breaking into the house, shouting that they'd searched the whole town for us. We ran in the darkness, over frozen ground, through the snow. The girls stumbled, cried, but kept going with me. I kept repeating, "Mommy's here, don't be scared. We'll make it. Just keep moving, don't stop." I heard Rosie struggling to breathe. Lily tripped and scraped her knee. I picked her up and nearly carried her, feeling nothing, no cold, no pain. My whole body was gripped by fear that they'd catch us, take my girls away. That night I lost everything, my home, my illusions, what little hope I had left. But I couldn't lose my daughters. I thought my heart would just break. I felt the ground slipping out from under me. I didn't know where to go, who to call for help, or to look for safety. Only one thing was clear. I had to save them, as long as I could walk myself. Jane dropped her head into her hands. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but she didn't wipe them away. She just stared at the worn-out table. Sam listened without interrupting. His face hardened, his eyes cold, but not toward Jane, toward her past, toward the ones who had forced her through all this. "I'm sorry," Jane finally said, sobbing. "Nobody cared about me back then. No one came to help. Only the girls stayed by my side." "You did everything right," Sam said firmly. "You saved them. You're stronger than you think." He gently laid his hand on her shoulder. "You're safe now. I won't let anyone take your children from you. You have a home here." Jane looked at him with real gratitude, a faint smile flickering in her eyes. "Thank you, Sam. Without you, we wouldn't have survived." The house grew especially quiet. Beyond the wall, the girls started laughing again, and that simple sound filled the kitchen with a warmth Jane hadn't felt since the night she ran through the cold, through all that pain and fear. A week had passed since that night. Spring hadn't come yet, but Sam's house was already filled with a new kind of light it had never known before. Every day started the same way, with the soft sounds of the kitchen and gentle laughter from the girls' room. Sam woke up before everyone else, not out of loneliness anymore, but because he was looking forward to the simple joy of those mornings, the sound of little bare feet, the smell of fresh bread, and Jane's cozy voice from behind the wall. Jane grew stronger with each passing day. Her cheeks grew pink. There was life in her eyes again. She took over the kitchen, baked bread, made soup, taught Lily how to shape dough for little pies, and showed Rosie how to fold laundry. Annie kept an eye on everything out of habit, as if she still couldn't believe that this warm fairy tale was really their new life. Sam spent a lot of time outside, but now he wasn't alone. The girls followed at his heels. Rosie carried the bucket, Lily wore Sam's hat, and Annie tried to feed the horses, though they scared her at first. Sam patiently showed each one how to stroke a horse's neck, how not to be afraid of the chickens, how to pour out feed evenly, so there'd be no arguing. "You girls run this place now," he'd say with a smile, watching the girls compete over who could help with the hay the best. One evening, after the sun had slipped behind the hills, Sam noticed Rosie had fallen asleep on his lap by the stove, and Annie, snuggled close, stared out the window and quietly shared her thoughts. "We have a home now, don't we?" she asked suddenly. Sam nodded, feeling something inside him turn over at those words. He caught himself realizing he'd grown more attached to these children than he'd ever expected. In their voices, in their awkward attempts to help, in their sudden hugs, there was something familiar, long forgotten, as if he himself was a boy again, believing for the first time that a home isn't walls, but people close by. Jane noticed a change in Sam. Sometimes she'd let her eyes linger on him longer than she needed to, smile at him over dinner, ask his advice about the house. Sometimes Sam realized he was looking forward to those glances, as if his whole new life was hiding behind them. In the evenings, they all gathered by the stove, and Sam read simple storybooks to the girls, ones that had once belonged to his mother. Lily would climb onto his lap. Rosie would drift off by the fire. Annie would gently stroke Jane's shoulder. There was laughter in the house. Jane and Sam both realized they hadn't felt this good in years. Now every day they spent together felt like a gift, something none of them had dared to hope for. Sam started dreaming that this happiness might just stay with them forever. One evening, the night seemed to linger longer than usual. The girls, worn out from playing and listening to stories, finally fell asleep beneath their warm blankets. The house filled up with a special kind of silence, the kind that only comes after long laughter and real happiness. Outside, the snowstorm had settled, but the kitchen lights stayed on deep into the night. When all was quiet behind the bedroom wall, and only the fire's last whispers filled the room, Jane gently tucked the girls in, lingered a moment by their beds, and then slipped quietly into the kitchen. Sam was sitting by the fireplace, watching the flicker of flames dancing on the walls, lost in thought. "Can't sleep?" he asked softly, not turning around. No. Jane smiled, taking a seat across from him. Just too much on my mind tonight. They fell silent for a few seconds, listening to the old clock ticking peacefully in the corner. I used to think I'd always be alone, Sam admitted quietly, cradling his mug in his hands. I thought this house would always stay empty. Sometimes he searched Jane's eyes. It felt like even the walls had grown strange to me. Jane stared into the fire for a moment, then looked back at Sam. There was tiredness in her eyes, but not loneliness anymore, just a quiet warmth. You know, I always dreamed I'd be happy, even just for a little while, she whispered. But the harder I try to hold on to the past, the farther away it slipped. But here, with you, Jane blushed. For the first time, I feel truly at peace. Like I can finally breathe. You gave me something no one else ever could. A sense of home. Sam nodded slowly, struggling to find the right words. I keep thinking, he said, I can't imagine waking up one morning and not hearing that laughter. Not seeing you all here. I guess I've changed too, these past few days. Jane reached out and gently touched his hand. We're not going anywhere, unless you send us away yourself, she said, her eyes sparkling with a playful smile. Sam smiled back, his eyes suddenly soft and open. I could never send you away, he replied quietly. A pause settled between them, filled with something new and gentle. Their eyes met, and the hush between them was full of honesty and hope. Jane slowly leaned forward, and Sam met her halfway, their foreheads just touching. Both their hearts raced, yet felt calm at the same time, as if all this was meant to be. Their first kiss was gentle and shy, but full of warmth. Then Jane nestled against Sam, her face buried in his shoulder, and he hugged her tight, like he was afraid to let go, like he was making a silent promise. Everything's going to be all right now. It felt as if happiness had finally come to stay beneath that roof, and the house itself, so tired of loneliness and worry, was filling up with new light and warmth. But their peace didn't last. One day, as Sam and Jane were walking home along an icy path, the spring snow just starting to melt, a sharp shout rang out behind them. Hold it right there. They both stopped and turned. 20 yards down the road, 3 men stood with revolvers drawn, their eyes locked on Jane. The men closed in quickly, not taking their gaze off her. Well, look what we found, sneered the oldest, staring straight at Jane. Imagine that, hissed another. So this is where you've been hiding. Sam instinctively stepped forward, shielding Jane. His chest tightened with fear, but he stood tall and wouldn't show it. Who are you and what do you want? He asked, his voice cold, fighting off a tremor. We're not here for you, cowboy, one of the men said lazily, not even glancing at Sam. It's the woman we've been looking for. Jane, did you really think you could hide from us? His voice was thick with fake concern, like talking to a stubborn child. Jane seemed rooted to the spot. What do you want? She whispered, clutching Sam's sleeve. Your kids, the second bandit smirked, flipping his revolver in his hand. We won them fair and square from your husband, Jane. Or did you forget how that sorry coward hid behind your skirts? A debt's a debt. Your husband wasn't much of a man, the leader added with a sneer. After that night you ran off with the girls, we caught up with him. Tried to run, just like you. Didn't make it. He paused, locking eyes with Jane. Sam felt Jane grip his hand, so tightly his fingers went numb. But he didn't move. He just held her even closer. He tried to talk his way out of it, begged us to let him go. Didn't even know where you'd gone. So we taught him a lesson. He's out there feeding the worms now. Jane's face turned pale. Her lips started to tremble. Sam felt a surge of anger rise in his chest, but forced himself to stay calm. Any rash move now could get Jane or the girls hurt. Now it's simple, the leader said. You take us to the house and hand over the girls, and we'll leave with them. Try anything stupid. We'll shoot you down like dogs and take them anyway. Behave, and maybe we'll let you live. He raised his Winchester, barrel glinting in the pale light. Well, are you just going to stand there? Sam slowly raised his hands to show he wasn't going to resist. Inside, he was boiling, frantically searching for a way out, but saw none yet. Gun on the ground. Now, One of the others barked. Sam carefully drew his revolver, glanced at Jane. She was trembling like a wounded bird, but kept her eyes locked on the ringleader. Sam tossed his gun into the snow by the road. That's more like it, the leader scoffed. Now move along. Don't try anything smart, or you'll end up like her husband. With revolvers pointed at their backs, they walked step by step toward the house, like crossing thin ice over a bottomless pit. Jane clung to Sam, her breath shaky, eyes full of fear and pain. Sam was tense, but his gaze was steel. One thing burned in his mind. He would not let them be hurt, no matter what happened. With every step toward the house, the tension only grew. Sam and Jane walked in silence, revolvers aimed at their backs. The crunch of snow beneath their feet, the heavy air. Everything felt like the earth itself sensed trouble. The gang leader kept barking orders, pushing them forward, not giving them a second to think. At the porch, one of the outlaws, never lowering his gun, snapped. "Get inside, Jane." Jane clenched her fists and hurried into the house. Inside, she turned back, her eyes wide with fear for her daughters, her hands shaking. Now it was Sam's turn. He put his foot on the threshold, then suddenly pretended to stumble, falling awkwardly to his knees right by the door. The bandits shouted. "Get up, you fool," one yelled. "Quit playing games," barked another, stepping closer. Sam got up, turned around, then almost on instinct, grabbed a log that was lying by the wall and hurled it at the nearest bandit. The man staggered back, cursing and trying to dodge. In that split second, Sam jumped into the house, slammed the door, and threw the bolt hard. Almost immediately, the shouts started outside. "Open up, you bastard. We'll show you." Gunshots rang out. Sam quickly pulled Jane down to the floor and dropped beside her, turning toward the girls. His face was set, eyes burning with desperate resolve. "Girls, get down. Now," he yelled. The girls screamed and dropped to the floor by the stove. One began to cry, another clapped her hands over her ears, and Annie tried to shield the little ones with her body. Bullets slammed into the door, splinters flying. The boards rattled, and tiny shards skittered across the floor. Jane covered her head with her hands, teeth clenched, and Sam held her shoulder tight. "Don't move. Stay down, everyone. Stay down," Sam barked. The shooting stopped as suddenly as it began. Heavy footsteps approached the door from outside. "Well, smart guys," the leader bellowed. "You've got 5 minutes. If you don't open this door in 5, we'll burn this shack to the ground, with all of you inside." "Got it." Lily sobbed quietly in the corner. Annie trembled, but fought back her tears. She gripped her sister's hands so tightly it hurt. Sam glanced at Jane. Her face was twisted with fear for her children. He was white as a sheet, but his eyes were set with determination. He knew this was no time to panic. He had to hold it together and figure out what to do next. The leader's voice came again through the door. 5 minutes to decide. Then you all burn. You hear me? By the stove, Jane looked at Sam, desperation in her eyes. The girls huddled together in the corner, crying softly, not understanding what would happen next. Jane struggled to hold back tears. She whispered, barely keeping her voice steady. "It's all because of us, Sam. We brought this trouble to your home. They didn't come for you. They came for us. If you don't open that door, they'll burn the house with all of us inside. I'll go to them myself and take the girls. It's the only way." Sam shook his head sharply, his face going hard, his voice low and unwavering. "No, Jane, you're not leaving. You're not going anywhere. You're my family now. I won't abandon you. I won't let it happen." Jane tried to protest, but Sam cut her off. "Your husband ran when things got scary. I won't do that. I don't care who's out there or what they're planning. I won't let them take you or the girls. Not ever." He set his hands gently on her shoulders and looked her straight in the eyes. "Trust me. We'll get through this. Together. Do you hear me?" Jane trembled, tears streaming down her cheeks. She looked one last time at her daughters, then back at Sam, and nodded softly. "I trust you. I'm scared, but I trust you." Sam acted in an instant. He quietly lifted the trapdoor in the floor and said to Jane, "Hurry, get into the cellar. The girls too." No matter what happens, stay quiet. Don't come out until I call you myself." Jane nodded and helped the girls climb down. Lily clutched her old doll, Rosie whimpered, and Annie turned to look at Sam, as if saying goodbye with her eyes. Sam looked at all of them and whispered, "It's going to be okay." He closed the cellar door and covered it with a rug, then listened for the voices outside. The house was filled with a tense, waiting silence, as if time itself had slowed down. Sam rushed to the next room, grabbed the old hunting rifle hanging on the wall, and at the same time reached under the floor behind the stove for his old Colt. His heart pounded wildly, but his thoughts were sharp and clear. He crept over to the window on the far side of the house, carefully opened the sash, and slipped outside, doing his best not to make a sound. Rounding the corner, Sam pressed himself against the wall, raised his rifle, and fired first. One of the bandits, caught off guard, dropped into the snow. The second man dove for cover and started shooting back. A fierce gunfight broke out. "They're not your kids," the leader shouted, ducking behind a stack of firewood. "Hand them over and we'll leave. This isn't your fight. You're going to die for someone else's family." "They're my family," Sam yelled back. "Get off my land while you still can." Bullets whistled in answer. Sam managed to shoot the second bandit, who fell to the ground with a cry. At that moment, the leader darted out from the side and fired almost point blank. The bullet hit Sam in the side. He cried out and fell into the snow, dropping his rifle. Breathing hard, the leader strode up, his face twisted in triumph. "What a fool you are," he sneered. "You're done for, hero." He raised his revolver, ready to finish Sam off. But suddenly, a shot rang out from behind. The leader froze, then slowly collapsed to his knees and fell face first into the snow. Behind him stood Jane, trembling all over, holding a pistol in both hands. Tears streamed down her face, her eyes wide with terror. "Don't you dare touch my family," she whispered. In the next instant, Jane rushed to Sam, dropping to her knees in the snow. "No, don't leave us. Don't go. You promised you'd never leave," she cried, cradling his head, unable to hold back her tears. Sam managed to open his eyes and gave a faint, pained smile. "I told you to stay in the cellar," he breathed, trying to smile. "I love you, Jane." And the girls. Jane hugged him even tighter, bending close to his ear. "I love you too. So much. So much." Sam smiled once more, then lost consciousness, knowing he had protected those he now called his family. After the shootout, Jane and the girls somehow managed to drag wounded Sam over to the bed. His shirt was quickly soaked with blood, his face pale, his eyes closed, his breathing shallow and uneven. Jane hastily bandaged the wound, her hands trembling from fear and exhaustion, but she wouldn't let herself break down, not even for a minute. She kept pressing her hand to Sam's forehead, giving him sips of water, whispering soft words of comfort. The girls wouldn't leave the bedside. Rosie and Lily, the youngest, sobbed quietly, clutching Sam's hands. Annie, the oldest, sank to her knees beside the bed, folded her hands, and began to pray in a tiny, shaking voice. "Lord, please don't take him from us. Please let him stay. Please let him wake up and be all right." Jane listened to her daughter's prayer and silently echoed the same words. She knew, if Sam didn't make it, their family would never be whole again. For 3 days and 3 nights, life in the house seemed frozen in place. Jane barely left Sam's side, constantly changing the dressings, moistening his lips, making sure he didn't get cold. The girls were always nearby. Lily brought fresh water and tried to be as quiet as she could. Rosie whispered little prayers, and Annie helped her mother, doing her best to act grown up. Every hour, every minute was filled with fear and hope. No one knew if Sam would survive the night or see another dawn. Jane didn't cry, but her eyes stayed red and swollen. She kept whispering the simplest words to Sam. "Hold on. We're here. Don't leave us." The girls hugged each other and their mother. And for the first time since this nightmare began, each of them truly understood just how much they needed one another. On the 4th morning, Jane brought in hot water like always, tucked the blanket around Sam, sat down, and took his hand. His palm was a little warmer than before, and suddenly she felt the faintest squeeze of her fingers. Jane froze, hardly believing what she felt. She leaned in close, her heart about to burst from her chest. Sam cracked his eyes open, slowly looked from Jane to the girls, and managed the faintest smile. In that instant, Jane broke down in tears, real tears of happiness for the first time in what felt like forever. "Sam," she called, her voice trembling. "Can you hear us?" Sam nodded weakly and tried to make a joke, though his lips quivered. "How could I not? With someone like you around." The girls rushed to him, hugging his shoulders. Annie buried her face in his chest. Lily sniffled. Rosie covered his hand with kisses. "We were so scared. We thought we'd lost you," Jane whispered, clinging to Sam as if she couldn't let go, not even for a second. He smiled, looking at each of them. From that moment, the days began to fly by. Sam grew stronger, Jane laughed again, and the girls ran around the yard helping with chores. The house filled with light, laughter, and gentle songs in the evenings. Soon, the first spring holiday arrived. The table was set with simple food, but for this family, it felt like a true feast. Sam sat at the head of the table, Jane by his side, and the girls all around. They held hands, and for once, it seemed like nothing could tear them apart. That day, each of them understood. Everything they'd gone through had only brought them closer. Now, they had more than just a roof over their heads. They had a home filled with love, kindness, and above all, faith in tomorrow. A few more weeks passed. Life slowly settled into a peaceful rhythm. Each day on the ranch was filled with simple joys. Breakfast together at the big table, the girls' laughter outside, daily chores, and cozy evenings by the fire. Jane hummed while she did the dishes. Sam taught the youngest girls how to feed the horses, and at night they'd all sit around and read aloud or just listen to the logs crackle in the stove. For the first time in a long while, everything felt truly calm and safe. One evening, as a warm spring darkness fell outside, Sam lingered on the porch. Jane joined him, wrapped in an old shawl, holding a mug of tea. She stood quietly by his side. For a few moments, they just looked up at the stars. No words needed. Sam slowly took Jane's hand and looked in her eyes with a warmth he'd never shown anyone before. "I used to think happiness was just a word," he said softly. "But now I know. It's real when I've got you and the girls right here." Right then, Sam dropped to one knee at the porch steps, smiling a little shyly, almost like a boy again. "Jane, will you marry me? Let's stay together always." Jane couldn't hold back her tears. She nodded, smiling through them, and hugged Sam tightly, whispering, "I'm yours. Always." A few days later, they rode into the nearest little town. In a small church, with only the pastor and the girls as witnesses, Sam and Jane exchanged their vows. Jane wore a simple light dress, her hair braided by Annie. The girls walked down the aisle ahead of them, each holding a bouquet of wildflowers. Jane and Sam held hands so tightly, as if afraid to wake from a dream. The pastor spoke a short blessing, then smiled and wished them well. After the wedding, they all went home together. Even the ride back was filled with laughter and the lightness of spring. Now, at last, their family was truly whole. Months went by. Time seemed to slow down, as if life itself wanted to give them space to let go of all their troubles and just be happy. And then, about a year later, another miracle arrived. A baby boy was born to Jane and Sam. He was strong, with clear blue eyes, and even as a newborn, his laughter was so joyful it made everyone else smile too. In the evenings, the family would gather out on the porch. The girls played with their baby brother, weaving crowns from wildflowers and arguing good-naturedly over who would rock the cradle. Jane sang lullabies from a rocking chair, and Sam told funny stories about life on the prairie. Their home was full of light, laughter, the smell of fresh bread, and real, honest joy. All the bad times are behind them, and ahead was a simple, truly happy life. There were moments when Sam would look at Jane, the children, and his little son in his arms, and realize he didn't need anything more in this world. Peace and love filled their home. And so the years went by, filled with simple, honest happiness that felt both ordinary and precious all at once. Sam and Jane never forgot how they found each other, and they always remembered how close they came to losing everything. Fate gave them a chance, and they made the most of it. Sometimes, the people who become your true family aren't the ones you're born with, but the ones who stand by you when you need it most. Remember, even when the world seems cold and indifferent, there's always a chance for happiness. Thank you for staying with us through the end of this story. If it touched your heart, please give it a like and subscribe. There are many more real stories about kindness and hope to come. Wishing you peace, warmth, and someone who'll always open their door to you. Until next time.